So I recently took my first visit to Kings Island, which is 364 acres located in Mason, Ohio, opened in 1972 and operated by Cedar Fair. And it has an awesome entryway, as you can see, with the Eiffel Tower replica and fountains. So cool. So much better than your typical amusement park. And right away, I realized that Kings Island was well beyond even what I anticipated based on the good things I had heard about this park, which is located just northeast of Cincinnati. It has 14 roller coasters, including the legendary The Beast, which goes way out in the woods and is so much fun and it's fairly smooth after the retracking, has a great second drop. Another big coaster is Diamondback with a very cool splashdown. It is a B&M hypercoaster, quite intense, pulls you over that top lift hill, and I didn't enjoy it as much as Raging Bull at Great America, but it was very close. And another one that I did not do the inverted coasters. I did not do Banshee, which is a very cool B&M invert from 2014 that is in the spot that used to be Son of Beast, which is a very notorious coaster that failed eventually. You can see Delirium there too, the giant frisbee from Huss. I just do not handle inverted coasters well. I've heard amazing things about Banshee. If you're someone who does okay on inverted coasters, you should definitely check it out. It just didn't do much for me. Another big one. My second favorite on the trip was Orion, the B&M Giga Coaster located in the Area 72 section, which is well themed near Flight of Fear. The first drop on Orion, I loved it. It's a 300-foot drop, which is why people consider it a giga. So smooth, so much float or airtime, you feel like you're just drifting to the ground for so long. Here we have another coaster, the Backlot Stunt Coaster, which seems like a family coaster, but has a pretty intense launch at the start and then an upward helix, which was one of the most forceful elements that I experienced on the entire trip. Used to be themed to the Italian Job, has some nice theming that was working with a helicopter and a fire effect. I don't want to oversell it, but it's a nice coaster to ride. Here's a historic one, the Racer. Only the red side was open when I was there. It wasn't racing. Famous for the Brady Bunch episode and also for really bringing coasters back to the forefront as there was a craze in the 70s. It was made by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters. My favorite coaster that I rode on this trip was Mystic Timbers, which you can see on the shot from the railroad. It is a GCI wooden coaster, which the stats aren't that impressive, but it is relentless, has so much airtime, and surprised me a lot because I figured after riding Orion that would be my favorite. Mystic Timbers was closed for much of the day, but ended up being my favorite of the day just because it just does not stop and is so much fun and so smooth. What I didn't like as much was the Bat. This is an aero suspended coaster. It opened in 1993 as Top Gun. Later was called Flight Deck. It only has a 78-foot drop. And while I said I didn't ride inverted coasters, this one kind of fits a little bit in that mold because you are sitting but riding under the track and it swings back and forth. Very odd effect that my brain just did not love. I will say that I enjoy, like many of the coasters at Kings Island, the way this goes out in the woods. It's located near a Great Wolf Lodge, and just Kings Island does a great job with its coasters of using the terrain. And while if you think about Iron Dragon at Cedar Point, which is a similar coaster, not as good, at least from what I've heard. I haven't been to Cedar Point yet, but because of the setting. The setting is so much better for the Bat, and the Bat also has some elements that that one doesn't have, but it gave me a headache, so it was not one of my favorites. It's also a really long walk to get back here, and the queue is massive, and there was basically no wait for this coaster, so it felt kind of silly to be going so far back into the woods. Back to the railroad again, which again, I love the fact that Kings Island has different kinds of rides. This is called the Kings Island and Miami Valley Railroad, which opened with the park in 1972. It does not cover the whole park. It mostly just circles the Rivertown area, but it does offer some really cool views of Mystic Timbers, like we saw earlier, and of Diamondback, which I mentioned earlier, which, like you can see in the woods, just very cool. Look, Diamondback, you can get views of from almost everywhere, but it's kind of an interesting perspective from the railroad. And what I love about this railroad as you go back through the woods is not even just that the ride is so thrilling. It does have a stop at the water park, which was not open because I was there in mid September, but it's just that it's a different type of ride. And that's something that, despite having so many roller coasters, which were my focus on this visit, that Kings Island does so well. It basically has all different types of rides. Not a ton of dark rides. We'll get to one in a little bit, but you've got more relaxed rides like this railroad. You have a lot of, flat rides, some that are thrilling, some not so much. An amazing kids area that I'll talk about in a minute, and of course, many coasters. And one of the examples of a different type of ride is a log flume. And we have this one, which is currently called Race for Your Life Charlie Brown, but actually opened in 1972. Has had a variety of names. Not going to go through all of them, including Nickelodeon theming for a while, but is well themed. I don't want to oversell it. We're not talking like Splash Mountain here or, Knott's Berry Farm or Timber Mountain Log Flume or something like that. But there's just a lot of different types of rides at Kings Island that work out so well. And I even like this shot of the swings with the racer behind it. Just the swings, I mean, they look cool. It's very similar to what was at Silver Dollar City, but I like it. The one dark ride is Boo Blasters on Boo Hill. It's an interactive dark ride, as you can see while I am shooting at various targets. Started out as Phantom Theater. There was actually rides before that, but in this mode, and the ride vehicles look basically just like the Omnimovers from the Haunted Mansion. Then it switched over to Scooby Doo themed ride, and then this one, which is a lot of fun. And I would say that that level of fun and good theming is fitting for the entire Planet Snoopy area, which, as you can see, has so many different rides. It's won numerous awards, and it's just so big and has a very cool variety of things you can do, like the log flume, like the dark ride, several roller coasters. So, just a lot of different options for guests. Another thing I want to mention too with Kings Island is they really seem to appreciate their history. The people that were there were just so happy to be there. People clapping after every ride. The park recently celebrated its 50th anniversary, and they have this little area in the middle, this kind of museum with a lot of signs and various background about the park, which is great for someone like me who had read about it but is not an expert on Kings Island and some of the history of it. So I love that. Also, the ride ops were amazing. They just all seem to take such good care of this park. And I was impressed as someone who has visited plenty of, Disney Universal well-run parks. It was up there. Another thing that's really good about Kings Island is the food. As you can see right here, this Coney barbecue is a place to go to. I had a pulled pork sandwich with baked beans, and they give you a hush puppy. And this gives me a moment to mention the meal deal, which is an incredible deal, especially if you're like me and I bought a single day ticket, which included parking and the meal deal. And basically, it was less than if I had just bought separately a ticket and parking. So the meal deal, which was priced around $33, was free, and so every 90 minutes, you can get meals. And here's another meal that I had here at the Chicken Shack, which is just chicken tenders and fries. But the food quality is much better than your typical, I would even say better than the comparable food at Walt Disney World. Not all the food, but in terms of the food I had, which was kind of your basic fast food type food, but it was much better than that. And so when you combine that with the ticket and getting the meal deal, it was really special and I will rave about it. Get that. You can also add drinks to it, which I did not do. So I did buy a few drinks, but not having to spend all that money is a big deal. So thank you for checking out this review. I know it was fairly quick of Kings Island. You can check out more at tomorrowsociety.com. I rated every ride that I experienced on the trip. I'm also going to have a trip report podcast coming out soon. There's just a lot to cover at Kings Island, and I really enjoyed my first visit. I hope to get back there again next year. Hope you enjoyed this review, and I will be back with more very soon.